Hey, it's good to be with Dave Ferguson. Dave's the lead pastor of Community Christian Church up in the Chicagoland area. Dave, it's always good to connect with you.
Good to see you, Tony.
And today we're going to be talking about another new resource that you have out. You just crank out the books. I'm pretty impressed.
Well, when you have good people around you who you co-author them with, that makes it easier.
Yeah, so tell me about your co-author, Todd Wilson, is working with you on this project. Tell us a little bit about Todd for those who may not be familiar with him.
Story goes back a few years. Todd and I became friends when he became a Christ follower through a friend of mine, eventually became the executive pastor. When he wanted to go multi-site, they got a hold of us. We became buddies, and then we've kind of launched the Exponential conference together. And Tony, you know Todd. I mean, the guy, he's like a mad scientist. He's a genius. He really is a genius, and a good, very, very, very good friend.
All right. Well, the new resource, the new book, it's called Becoming a Level 5 Multiplying Church. So let's just begin right there. What is a Level 5 multiplying church?
Well, we actually had Lifeway do a little homework for us, and in broad strokes, we began to look at churches, particularly in North America, but we're also seeing this has application globally now, but particularly in North America, you can put them into kind of 5 different categories. One would be those churches that are in decline. 2 would be those that are plateaued. And what we found is about 80% of the churches would fall into those first 2 categories of either declining or plateaued. And then you have 3s. This is what we call level 3 churches, or growing churches. And you know this as well, Tony, that about 16% of churches in the country would be in this category of growing churches. Well, that leaves then level 4 and level 5. Level 4 would be what we call reproducing churches. In level 4 churches, there's probably about 4% of the churches across the United States actually reproduce either a brand new campus, a site, or a brand new church. And as we delved a little more into that, only about half of those actually did it on purpose. And probably half of those are actually by splits.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really leaves then, if you do the math, we really don't have any great examples of what we call level 5 multiplying movement-making churches in the United States currently. And the whole book is really this challenge to go like, we can no longer be satisfied with just being a 3, when really, if you look at Acts 1:8 and other things, Jesus challenges us to think movementally and about multiplication. How do we actually move to level 4 and level 5, becoming level 5 churches? And it describes, I think, kind of in the American church in particular, I think we become satisfied with being 3 and even making that what success looks like, being just a 3. And how do we move to 5? And there are some tensions that exist between being a 5, 4, and a 3.
So I'm assuming you would put Community Christian in the level 5 category, particularly not only what you're doing in Chicagoland, but through Exponential and the New Thing Network. But can you give us some other examples out there, Dave?
Actually, to the contrary, Tony. I mean, we're doing a better and better job, but and we offer an assessment. We can talk about that in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But even a community, as much as we value this, now I think we'd probably put ourselves as a level 4 church.
Okay.
And right now, we're having a hard time finding any level 5 churches in the United States. So level 4 would be those churches that are reproducing on a regular level, but level 5 are really those that are multiplying in what we call movement-making churches. Okay. We have a guy named Ralph Moore, you may know, Ralph from Hawaii, who probably is the best example of maybe a level 5 church in the United States.
Tell us a little bit about their story then.
What they've done there, where Ralph's pastors have started his church, is they've created a culture that really values multiplication, a culture where multiplication has become the norm, where at every level, whether it's in a home group or whether it's at one of their churches, if you're not multiplying, if you're not talking about apprentice making in our language, that is something that's unusual. And so it's not the exception. That is actually is the norm. And you see that really throughout the whole, I don't want to say organization, throughout the whole movement.
So tell me, why do you think this is an important conversation for right now, Dave?
I think this is an absolutely critical conversation. I think we've come out of a season of the life of the church, particularly in North America, where we have consistently platformed platform leaders who are leading growing churches. And when we platform those folks, and I've probably been one of those guys, everybody else kind of aspires to it. And we think, oh, that's what success must look like. But I think as we put what success looks like in the North American church up against what success looks like in Scripture, you see a disparity there. Okay, something's a jive here. And I think we have to say, okay, hey, I mean, certainly being a level 3, growing is better than 2 or 1, plateaued or declining, but it still is not making near the missional impact that can make if you really take on this challenge of being a reproducing or multiplying church. Rick Warren said this, and I would agree. I mean, I'd rather have one church of any size that's starting 10 churches than a church of 1,000 people. I think what we've done in the past is we value the church of 1,000 plus made that success even more than how do we continually multiply on and on and on and on. And again, back to Scripture too, as I read Acts and Jesus' challenge to us, both personally and then through, the apostles, what I see there is that movement is how you accomplish the mission. Movement's how we're going to accomplish the mission of Jesus, and movement only happens when we're multiplying churches, not just growing churches. Because when you're a multiplying church, you're thinking about legacy and not just your own personal longevity, or even your own personal kind of growth. You're thinking about, no, how do I think about generations to come beyond, and ultimately that actually translates into a lot more lives changed.
So for church leaders then, what do you think some of the things are that we need to either unlearn or kind of rethink?
Well, there's a few things that happen. I mean, there's some tensions that exist between being a what I would call a level 3 growing church and a level 5 multiplying church. And one of the tensions is early on, even in the conception stage, in the vision stage, and am I going to be a church that's about here or there? And if we're just a growing church, we're only thinking about right here, my little neighborhood, my piece of land, my few people. How do I continue to grow that? But if from the very beginning, as you're sketching out kind of what do I want this thing to become, if you're saying, you know what, no, I know from the very beginning, we're dreaming of multiple locations. We're thinking about how many other churches we can plant. Wow, could this thing become a network? Even at the conception stage from the very beginning, that's where you begin to make choices between, am I going to be a growing church or a multiplying church? There's also then once you get started, there's the tension between actually growing and sending. And it shows up with your leaders. And I think it calls us to be about leadership development, artist development, and not just so that we have more and better leaders for our groups and our teams and our staff, or more and better artists for the stages that I have and that lead large group celebration services. But I'm thinking about how do I grow enough leaders, okay, that I'm actually sending them to other places to start other churches, to start other sites, to other places around the world. Same thing with the artists. And if you're only thinking about growing, you only need so many, and you're keeping them all right here. But if you're thinking about multiplying, you're going, I need a lot of these, and I need to continue to develop that pathway of artists and leaders so I can be sending them all over this part of my world and really around the world. There's probably one more tension, too, that I think exists just particularly for seasoned leaders, and that's the tension of security versus risk. And like me, Tony, I mean, you've been a part of large churches, and great things happen in large churches, but there's also the temptation, particularly for senior leadership, we could probably coast for a while, and people will continue to ask us to speak at conferences, continue to ask us to do, video casts like this to tell everybody else what to do. But I don't really have to take that many risks. But if you're a multiplying church, okay, and not just a growing church, I mean, it continually challenges you that I have to take risks personally. I have to take risks financially, all those kind of things. And that, it doesn't end when you get to be a certain size or a certain age. But no, that's the call on all of us. So there's a bunch of those tensions we're going to deal with.
So you suggested earlier, maybe community Christians at that level 4 and with a desire to be at level 5, what would you say the biggest barrier is for your church to get to that place?
One of the things, so for example, in an effort to move from, to a 4 and a 5, like with our last generosity initiative, we ended up building a larger auditorium. Clearly a move for a level 3 church, right? But then that's not a bad thing, because understand I am all about growing, but I don't want to just be about growing. I also want to be about multiplying. So the other thing that we did through this generosity, we also built a space that's our leadership training center that is about developing and and train more and better church planters. And as part of the vision casting, we told our people, say, hey, this auditorium, and our mission is to help people find their way back to God at community. We say, hey, this is going to help people find their way back to God. Thousands probably. But this LTC, this Leadership Training Center, we're training church planters, that's going to help tens of thousands of people find their way back to God. And so for us to be willing to live in that tension of doing both those things is, I think, part of how we're saying, okay, we're not going to be content with just being a 3 or even a 4. We want to be moving towards being a 5.
So you mentioned earlier in our conversation something about an assessment, Dave. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, just to make the covert overt, I mean, part of our intention with the Exponential Conference, we want to change the conversation. We really want to change the conversation of what success looks like in a local church. We went through helpful, good stuff. We went through a season in the life of the church. It was all about the church growth movement, which really did kind of platform growing churches. And that was a good thing. It restored the value of evangelism and that kind of stuff. But we think we need to move beyond that. And so we're trying to develop some and offer some real practical tools. And one of the tools we have is this level 5 assessment tool. And basically what it does, it takes a look at your church in 3 ways. Who you've been, who you are, and then who you aspire to be. And it'll give you actually a number, 1 to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, who you've been in the past, who you are now, so you can kind of see where you're trending, and then who you aspire to be. And then as a result of that assessment, then you can also kind of different paths you can take to kind of continue to move towards those aspirational goals that you have.
That's great. And so I'm assuming you're going to be unpacking this and more at Exponential this year. For those who haven't been to that experience, can you share a little bit more about that too?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that's, I think, different about the Exponential Conference is I hear other people talk about conferences more like kind of like triangles, where you have a few speakers at the top and then everybody else kind of comes and sits and listens and you hear them and then everybody leaves. We think of Exponential really more of a circle that, I mean, Tony, if you're there and you're speaking, you're not only speaking, but you're also hanging out with everybody. You're rubbing elbows with people. And so the guy who's just planted a church gets to come and go like, hey, Tony, what do you think about this? Because and that's a value that we have, that no, we're all in this together. Mm-hmm. This isn't about, a few of the elite and everybody come and learn. No, we're all in this mission together. So that's kind of the vibe that we're creating. And together, how do we all, no matter what size church we are, move to becoming a level 5 church? And so what we've done is we've tried to platform folks that there are examples either domestically of level 4 churches like a J.D. Greer. J.D.'s killing it at the summit. Mm-hmm. I love what he's doing. And I'd encourage everybody he doesn't know I'm doing this, but I'd encourage everybody to pick up his latest book. He's a great example of that. I mentioned Ralph Moore from Hawaii, who candidly, this is a kind of a little bit of a dilemma. JD's a dynamic speaker, so he'll be awesome. Ralph is just kind of an average guy, but mm-hmm. he's doing great work. And so in some ways, to me, when you hear kind of just an average guy who's not like this awesome communicator who you see making a huge impact, it kind of gives the rest of us courage to go like, hey, I think I could do that. Mm-hmm. You'll hear that from him. Mark Batterson's going to be there. Mark's a great example, I think, of a level 4 church. Matt Chandler's going to be speaking. He's also, I think, an example of that. And Brian Houston, I wouldn't put Brian in a level 5 category. Clearly an inspiring communicator, but I do think you're seeing at a big way someone who's trying to grow and also multiply when you see what they're doing even with Hillsong.
That's right.
So that's a little bit of a taste of what's to come.
Well, very good. Well, again, Dave, I always appreciate being able to connect to you and talk about not only your new challenges for church leaders, but for the church generally. And this sounds like a great challenge for the church to think beyond the walls of just their location, but how to bring the gospel to the world in a new way. So I appreciate that. Dave, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Tony.